to everybody. My name is Pam Evans. I'm a dietitian and a certified diabetes educator, and I'm happy to be here with Jon. We're going to have a discussion today around the macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, and protein, and we're going to answer your questions. We're going to talk a little bit about sugar substitutes, and then just offer up some time for questions for you later. So
yeah, and so if anybody is new to us, I'm Jon. I was 405 pounds at my biggest, and I lost about 220 pounds in about 9 months with the bariatric sleeve, vertical sleeve gastrectomy, and Pam was my dietitian. Mm-hmm. So, and really this program is just to educate you guys from a dietitian standpoint and a patient standpoint, to give you guys what the true makeup of what to look for. So mm-hmm. Pam's going to kind of dive into the carbs, fat, protein, what they are. I'm going to dive into my experience levels and stuff like that, what worked for me. I'm very scientific based. I like to study that kind of stuff. You guys may not like to, but that's just what I like to do. Mm-hmm. So that's that. So here is Pam's slide, and she can go ahead and start with that.
So we're going to start with the three macronutrients, carbohydrates, fat, and protein today, and talk about what they are and what kinds of foods fall into those categories. What I really appreciate about Jon's input here is that a lot of this is the kind of the basic stuff that we learn as dietitians and we teach, and a lot of the science, but it doesn't really fall into what's best for people and how people can work with these carbohydrates, fats, and protein. So I will come up with a lot of the dietitian part of this, and then Jon's going to add in his point of view, which is really helpful to kind of get an idea on how best we can work with these macronutrients in our diet. So, and when I use the word diet, it's what we're eating. We're going to be talking about some better fats and better protein, etc., but we want to make sure that we appreciate the fact that all foods fit. There's no illegal foods, there's no banned foods, because as soon as we do that, that becomes a forbidden fruit and something that you're going to be craving. So again, we're going to get away from the all or none thing and kind of talk more in general about ways to look at foods a little bit differently and be curious about them.
Yep.
Yeah. So moving on. So we're going to start with protein, and the three macronutrients that we're talking about are protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and these are all needed by our bodies in different forms and different ways, and everybody is different in what their percentage is that they need. Now, for many people, you don't want to sit there and figure out what your protein, carb, and fat ratios are. You want to just be able to eat and enjoy your food and feel good. And Jon is really helpful in helping people come up with a number that might be helpful for them and kind of fine-tune how best to make this work for your body, whether you're pre-bariatric surgery, post-bariatric surgery, or not even considering bariatric surgery. And many of these foods are combination foods. So the first thing we're going to talk about is protein. And we know that protein is, it's needed for our muscle. That's what most people think of course. It's the structure of our bodies. It's also for building and repairing of our body cells, etc. So it's more for the structure of our bodies. And Jon, what do you want to add to that?
So yeah, it's the building block of our muscles, of our movement. So to get the strength you need to have mm-hmm. the protein. But it's much more in strength. It's basically, it's what keeps the motor going. Yep. As far as that goes. It does not really give you energy mm-hmm. per se at its initial stage. To use it as energy for movement and stuff like that, it has to be converted. So that's why we have the carbs and the fat. Mm-hmm. So,
mm-hmm. And one thing that I know about protein and muscle structure is that it's one of the things that is indicative of how long people can stay in their homes and stay independent. Making sure that you get enough protein and have muscle on board can keep you stronger, reduce your risk of fractures, and just keep you healthier for a longer period of time. So protein's really important. And we're going to, Jon spends a lot of time on kind of talking about how much protein you'll need as well.
Yep. It's the one thing that you can truly monitor if you're getting enough mm-hmm. protein very simply because we live in a day and age right now where we have scales, we have Fitbits, yep. we have all that stuff that can actually really focus on what we need. Mm-hmm. So that's the main thing.
Yep.
By knowing what your body needs, you can give it what it needs.
Yes, exactly.
So that's that.
Right. So, and then the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have been in the news lately. A lot of people are trying to cut back on their carbohydrates. A lot of people feel much better when they cut back on their carbohydrates. I think in general, as a culture in the United States, we're getting too many. And we'll talk in slides to come. We're going to be breaking this down and talking about the different kinds, what falls into the category of carbohydrates. But generally, it's used for energy and to keep our engine running. Starch and sugar convert to glucose in your blood, and that's what we use for the initial form of our energy. So we do need some carbs in our diet. Also, this is the category for the most part where we're getting our fiber from, and fiber is extremely important for our colon health as well.
Yep. So I think when we talk about carbs and fat and all that stuff, there are those micronutrients and those macronutrients. The fiber and stuff like that, more of a micro. So that's almost as important. It's getting the stuff going.
Yep,
so.
Exactly. And I think I read somewhere that our current population gets about 33% less fiber than our great-grandparents did.
I really understand
So we're getting a lot of our carbohydrates from processed carbohydrates, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The next category is fat. And for those of you who are my age, you remember in the 80s. I don't know if you remember that, John. Were you
I was
alive
pretty
then?
young. I was around the 80s. 82.
I know my children say to me who are in their 20s, they're like, you never fed us eggs when we were little. And I said that was because that was the decade when we were not supposed to eat eggs because they were too high in fat and cholesterol, which they've now shown to be false, and that we need more fat in our diets. And in fact, it's the carbohydrate and the sugar that's becoming more of the problem nutrient in our culture in the United States. So we do need fat. It's needed for fat-soluble vitamins to be absorbed. It makes us feel full. It's the slowest macronutrient to be absorbed and digested. So when we have more fat in our diets and when we're eating more fat and healthy fats, we actually feel more full for a longer periods of time. Eating just carbohydrate messes with your blood sugars and will make you feel more hungry. So it's really important for that and for production of hormones.
Yeah, I think the misconception of fat can be taken is your carbs and your fat really should be married. Meaning, like, if your carb content in that meal is going to go up, you need to decrease your fat content in that meal because they work with each other.
Right.
And like they were always put as demons. Like, have this, have that, not that. And this really teaches us that they're not enemies.
Right.
They work together, and that's what we're going to teach you. Is
Exactly.
how to make them work together.
Right. How to get a combination of all of these
Yep.
foods in a healthy
And what I always start people at is I do per meal 30% protein, 20% carbs, 50% fat. However, that may not work for you. So I teach you how to adjust those macros with the devices that we recommend, and you can get your macros spot on pretty quickly. But you're always messing with it. Like, because if you're losing weight, your body's going to change, and as your body changes, your needs change. So that's
so fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about protein sources. And again, remember that there are foods that are combination foods that fall into the three macronutrient categories. They're not always cut and dry, exactly perfect, like, for instance, protein. Protein sources, they come from both animal and fat and plants. And generally what's recommended is that we cut back on some of the higher saturated fat foods, such as red meat and cheese and those kinds of things. We'll talk about that in a minute. We know that too much protein is converted in the body to sugar and then to fat. So, for instance, a lot of people will sit down with a 16-ounce steak thinking that that's going to be converted all to muscle, and we can't absorb all that as protein. So too much protein, and in the United States, for many people, they do get too much protein, but for people, especially with bariatric surgery, it's really important that you get enough. So that's one of the most important things that we talk about is how to get enough protein and where is your protein coming from.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest takeaways is you cannot have 80 grams of protein in one serving and absorb it. It's going to be converted. And it's either going to be converted into sugar or it's going to be converted into fat. Your body does not and will not store protein as protein.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things is even if you had bariatric surgery and you're able to get a shake down, but you do it all, like you get one of those shakes that are 45 grams, you can't absorb all that.
Yep.
And I really think if you are between 15 and 28, 30 is your maximum.
Yep,
and
that's exactly
start
right.
low and work your way up.
Right.
You know, because and why I say start low and work your way up is if you're doing 30 grams all the time, you may find out that by adjusting that down a little bit in the one meal, but adding it back in at the end, like what you would have missed, you may actually start losing and break through that plateau.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's the
Right.
kind of concept of that.
So we know that eating protein throughout the day is better. We can absorb it better than trying to make a protein shake with 80 grams of protein, trying to get all your protein in one fell swoop. You're going to feel sick. You're not going to absorb it all. It's not going to work. So getting this throughout the day is extremely important.
Yeah, and a lot of people forget that vegetables have protein in them as well.
Yes, they do.
So if you are doing a shake that scoop has 30 grams and you have kale and you have spinach and you have some other stuff that has minor amounts of protein in it, you're just tacking on.
Yeah.
So you can add the protein from your vegetables into your shake when you time it out. So and sometimes that stuff tastes better than that disgusting protein powder.
That's exactly right, yes. And that'll give you some more fiber as well. You won't get a huge amount of protein from your vegetables, so you can't count just on vegetables for getting your protein. But it is important to understand. It's not on my list, but there is a little bit of protein in vegetables as well.
Yeah. And it's not like you can get all of it from it, but if you are trying to stick to that 15 to 20 grams per meal or per outing of eating, you can use that.
Yeah. So looking back on, let's go back for a minute.
Okay.
So what I wanted to show you was that some of these products, for instance, dairy, such as milk and yogurt, they have the curds and the whey in there. So they're going to have carbohydrates and protein in there and some fat, depending on the kind of milk that it's made with. If you look at something like cottage cheese, that's mostly protein because they've taken out the whey, where a lot of the carbohydrates are. So the cottage cheese will have a higher percentage of protein in it than something like milk or yogurt, which will have more carbohydrates in it.
Yep.
So there's all these combination foods. Nuts and nut butters are on the protein list here. You're going to see that is also a source of healthy fats. So that's another combination food. You're not going to just get pure protein, but nuts and nut butters do have protein in them as well.
I think almond butter is great. I think almond butter is great. I think peanut butter is one of those things that is high in sugar and stuff like that. Hey, we have some guests that came up, so you guys can go ahead and grab those chairs and sit down, and we'll
ladies,
get to talking
good
to you.
See you. Yeah.
So we have some people here that might be asking questions, and it'd be great for you guys. So there's two black chairs over there. You guys can
Glad you
grab.
could join us.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're talking about protein right now.
Yeah. So that's the main thing and obviously natural is the way to go. Alive or it ate something that was alive.
Right.
Fruits, vegetables, and stuff like that. That's the main thing.
Exactly.
So,
and especially for the nuts and nut butters, they used to make a lot of the peanut butters and the almond butters, et cetera, with added sugar and added hydrogenated fats and horrible fats. Look on the label and make sure it's natural. It's made with that nut, and that's it. Maybe a little salt.
Yep.
That should be what you're looking for when you look for nut butters. Yeah.
Grind your own something.
Yes,
Yep.
you can grind your own, like Fred Meyer and New Seasons. Yeah.
yep.
Yep.
You guys can bring them in here, like a little closer. We won't bite. Yeah.
Yes, you will.
So we're live on Facebook right
Yeah.
now. We're actually live. So you guys are, yeah. All right.
So that's that. So we'll go to the carbohydrate. Want to talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So carbohydrates are found in many foods, and what we generally divide them up is into the form of processed or unprocessed versions of carbohydrates. And so what we're going to talk about today is kind of looking at the unprocessed or natural carbs as a preferred version of getting these carbohydrates in.
Yep.
They have nutrition. They are picked from the ground or dug out, or they're more natural. They're not as processed. They have fiber. They have vitamins and minerals that we need daily. And you can see the list here. We have legumes and beans, lentils, split peas. They also have carbohydrates. So when we're talking about these products, these are another one of those combination foods, that have protein. So we also have protein from beans, lentils, and split peas.
Exactly.
And vegetables and fresh fruit have the carbohydrates, and whole grains, and those are 100% whole grains. Those are the unprocessed forms of carbohydrates that we'll find in our diets.
Exactly. So I think one of the main things is not all foods are like you're rarely going to ever find a meal that is strictly, this is only carb, this is
Right.
only fat,
Right.
this is only protein. So learning about the percentages and stuff like that, and learning how the food itself works with you is
Right.
going to be huge. Like
Yes.
you may find out that pork does this to you, meat does this to you, and you just work with it. You know, and you learn. So
And we know that a combination of all those macronutrients, of having some carbohydrate and protein and fat at your meals, is kind of preferred as far as your blood sugar regulation goes as well. Because again, it will help with really healthy rolls in your blood sugars versus spikes.
Yep.
So having a combination of foods is extremely important.
Don't the processed carbohydrates turn into sugar very quickly?
Yes,
Like,
they
Yeah.
do.
and whereas the natural whole grain
Yes.
whole ones
Right.
are
Exactly.
slower.
Exactly.
Yep.
And some of that is because of the fiber that's in the unprocessed. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the food that's in our generation that's new. Think about all the boxed and processed carbohydrates that you get in cans and frozen foods that our great grandparents didn't have. And you know, they picked their food and killed their food and dug it up, and they didn't have this processed stuff, and they didn't have as much of that added sugar.
Exactly.
For sure. So these are the unprocessed, or natural carbs, and of course they're the ones that we prefer people to have. We're not going to always do that, but again, if you find that you're getting a lot of the processed carbohydrates, which we'll talk about in a minute, think about ways that you could maybe get some more of these in, especially vegetables.
yeah. So like you have whole grains on there as one of them, but a lot of whole grains are processed.
Yep.
So when you're looking at stuff like that, whole grains are better in a moderation than something with like white flour. White flour is heavily processed.
Right.
So there's like, think about like a scale. Like there's a range. So if you want to have a roll, go for a whole wheat roll or a sourdough roll, something like that, where it's less processed. The reason why sourdough is good is because it's fermented. It's got a living organism in it. So
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
yeah. So that's kind of thing. It's like
Yeah.
you can still have those processed things. Don't feel like we're saying you can't ever have them. Just know, like, if you're gonna have them, you eat for what you're going to be doing, not for what you already have done. So if you're gonna go out and you need more of those fast-going carbs, the ones that process quickly, that might be a good
Yeah,
option.
absolutely.
So, ready for the next slide?
Yeah. So now let's talk about processed carbohydrates. What are those? Well, we put a list down here. They don't have nutrition. They don't have fiber. They pretty much have everything processed out of them. So they're basically honey, syrup, sodas, candy, cookies, pies, sweetened cereals, etc. And everyone's going, well, those are delicious, and I'm not going to, get rid of them in my diet totally. But start to think about which ones are the most important, and which ones are that if you do want to keep them there, where are you going to be able to limit some of these things as well? And especially there's 80% of the foods that we find in the supermarket now has added sugar. So you're going to find added sugar in everything from ketchup to canned soups to everything. So one of the things we'll do in a future webinar is to look at how to look at a label and start to look for the sugar that's in that as well.
Exactly. So you have a few things on here I actually want to talk about. So you have sugar. There's obviously substitutions, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But honey is a natural
Right.
sugar and stuff like that. But there are better and worse. So if you go to the store and you see the little bear with the honey in it, that's not the one to buy.
At Fred Meyer,
Yeah.
probably.
So, but honey is actually really good for you in moderation if you get local raw honey, because those bees are flying around in your environment. And local means that they're from your area. And that actually is really good for your gut biome and stuff like that. So we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. So there are some alternatives.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's also good for people with allergies.
Yeah,
local
exactly.
honey is supposed to be very helpful with that as well. A lot of people find that they can use less honey instead of sugar, so they're using less of it in general. As far as the body goes, it's absorbing it pretty much the same way, any of these things, but there will be a little bit more nutrition in the honey for
Yeah.
sure. But you don't want to use it as a nutritious food.
Yeah, and like there's syrups. A lot of people in their coffees, they get those artificial syrups and stuff like that. I stay away from them the best I can just because it's not real.
Right.
So if you have to have that to make your coffee good, obviously dive into it because that's a better choice than doing the other. Sodas, just stay away from them. If you have to have them, there are better alternatives out there. And what you're going to notice is you're probably actually craving the carbonation, not the
Right.
soda part.
Right.
So a good carbonated water that actually tastes good is probably what you need to get used to.
Right.
And
But you have to be mindful of that after
as
bariatric surgery.
I was just about to say
Yeah.
it. So I did not have anything carbonated other than kombucha, and I still, when I have my kombucha, because it is fermented, it does have some carbonation in it. I open the cap and let it sit for like 45 minutes. Let it all bake away,
Yep.
and then I drink
Yeah.
it. So
You think about how soda has evolved in our generation. Is that used to be we'd have a can of it at a picnic in the summer, and now young people are drinking 64 ounces a day. It's extremely bad for our bodies. One of the things I love to say is that we're the only mammals on the planet who drink our calories after we're weaned.
yeah.
So you think about that, right? We're the only mammals who drink our calories after we're weaned. I told that to my partner, and he texted me the next morning, and it said vampire bats on it. So I knew he would find an exception to that rule.
How long did it take him to do that, though?
He probably had that figured out in a minute. But anyway, so really, water is the thing that nourishes us, and it is the best. Once we get the flavor of sugar water or other things, we're going to want that. We're going
Exactly.
to prefer that, and it's really hard to get back to just plain water. It seems really boring, but work on that. Maybe squeeze some lemon or lime in your water. Maybe you can do those vegetable infusions that people like a lot. So maybe people like it when it's colder or hotter.
Oh, yeah.
So think about, there's lots of herbal teas that are out there that can substitute as well. So
100%. Yep.
Yep.
So the next one is fats.
Fats. So the lovely ladies that are in here with me today went through the same generation of the 80s when we didn't eat fat because it was bad for us. Do you remember that? Fat-free everything, the Snackwell cookies.
Yeah.
And so there was no fat in them, so we could eat 8 of them, right? Or the whole thing of them,
I
right?
did Dr. McDougall's
Yeah.
extremely
Right,
low-fat
right,
vegan diet.
right.
And actually, I lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
But I found I kept eating more and more sweets. And
Exactly.
more and more
That's exactly
carbs
right.
on it.
So one of the things that we found out is that there was a twist in the science during that time, and we found out that, oh my goodness, wait a minute, sugar was kind of the bad guy, but all of a sudden it was called out to be fats. So egg farmers went out of business, we all ate more carbohydrates, and as a nation we all put on a ton of weight during that time because we're eating a lot more carbohydrates. So what we know now is that fat is very good for our bodies. It's extremely important for us, and we are starting to get a little bit more familiar and more comfortable eating more of the fats. However, just like with the carbohydrates, we've processed the heck out of a lot of fats. For instance, we've made butter into margarine, in the stick margarine, and most people know that that's not good for us at all because it has trans fats in it. And we don't want any trans fats at all, which is the partially hydrogenated fat that you see on the riskier fats on this list here. The heart healthy fats are the olive oil, avocado oil, which you can cook with. It has a higher boiling point. Is that the word? A higher boiling point than olive oil, so you can cook with it. Nuts, salmon, flaxseed, and chia seed. And with the flaxseed and chia seed, you're getting some of those omega-3 oils, which are very helpful. You're also getting some fiber with that as well. So the riskier fats, which are less heart healthy, will be things like red meat and butter and cream. Those are all saturated fats. High-fat dairy products. However, there's been some research recently that said that's not as harmful as we used to think. So as a dietitian, this changes like by the minute. So,
Yeah.
And I do say for people, butter is probably better than any of those chemically induced margarines of any kind. Just use less of it, right?
Yeah.
And if you have cream or high-fat dairy products, just use less of it. And cheese is a delicious food that most people and dogs and pets and everybody loves. But we know that because it's so high in fat, it's going to have more calories per bite. It's going to have more calories, and we eat a lot of cheese. It's easy to overeat that. So kind of looking at some of these higher fat foods like nuts. Nuts are extremely healthy. I eat them every day. They're wonderful. However, if you're using that as your primary source of protein, you're going to be getting, and you're eating them all day long, you're going to be getting too many calories. So you do have to be mindful of the caloric impact that a high-fat, very high-fat diet can, and make sure that you choose more of the heart-healthy fats and less of the riskier fats.
And I think you also need to focus on if your fats are going to go up, your carbs have to go down.
Yep.
So if you have a whole lot of carbs, your fat content needs to be lower.
Yep.
per meal. It's not per the day, it's per the meal.
Right.
So if your fat content's going to be up, your carbs are going to go down, and vice versa. So, but by the carbs burn so quick, you're going to get those spikes. By the fat burning so slow, you're going to have more of the maintained.
Right.
So when you are a fat burner and your body utilizes fat the proper way, you may actually have more energy, have more ability to perform, but you got to also remember, your liver can only store so much energy, basically. You can outrun your liver very quickly.
Right.
So if you are going to do like CrossFit or a big marathon, all that stuff, endurance type stuff, you're going to need a more carb-based diet and stuff like that. Now, I'm saying healthy carbs. But if you're going to be sitting on your couch at home having a more lazy day, that's actually the day to have more of a fat-based diet, because it's going to be more long-term. You'll find out you're not going to the kitchen every 20 minutes to grab a snack. You're watching a whole movie and go, I didn't go get popcorn, because you don't have the desire for it. So that's the main thing for that. And about the red meats and the butter, the one thing I would add to that is, you are what you eat. You want high quality stuff. You want grass-fed butter. You want grass-fed beef, because those cows are getting the good nutrients, so they're coming to you. I would prefer a salad over a store-bought steak, stuff like that. And then, so like, if you have better quality meats, go for the better quality meats. That's just what I would do. And the one thing about oils is, the main oils out there are canola oil, which is absolutely horrible for you. Its rancidity rating, that's what you're thinking about. Like, the higher the heat, when it actually goes rancid, it becomes dangerous for you. Canola oil hits that at like 97 degrees. How hot is your body? 98.6. Once it hits your body, it's dead. It has no nutrient benefit. That's the vegetable oil. Olive oil, it's about 250, 300 degrees. That's an average medium high heat. If you're going to go any higher, avocado oil, 500 degrees. Coconut oil, 500 degrees. Coconut oil is a little... Some people like it, some people hate it, and stuff like that. I think it's a great source of MCTs, which MCTs are converted into ketones instantly. They don't need to go through the liver.
MCT is medium chain triglycerides. It's a different version of the fat. Yeah. So
what that basically... MCTs do not need to be processed. MCT oil and stuff like that does not go through the liver. It is processed in the stomach and the intestine and goes in that way. So your body doesn't have to work as hard, and it's converted into ketones pretty quickly. So that's how that goes. Now, your whole diet should not be that.
Right.
So
it is a saturated fat.
Yeah.
So
you have to worry about that, but also you have to think about. You have to have everything in moderation.
Exactly.
So like, is it good? I think so. Some people have different ways. So like, if your whole meal is based on that, that's not good. No matter what it's good for, it's not good. So that's that. So next slide is the sugar substitutes.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
I think it's the number one question as a dietitian I get asked every day.
Yeah.
What should I have sugar substitutes? Should I not have sugar substitutes? So I put a few of the big ones on here. John's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And I just have to say that as far as the research goes, it is the most heavily researched additive by the FDA. And they have been studying it forever, as long as they've been around. However, they've been studying them with rats, not humans. And we can't, load up a human with saccharin for 30 years and then see what happens. It's not ethically correct.
Exactly.
So we can look at some of the side effects that some of these have. I think in general, we've found out that these are not inert substances. They do have more of an impact on our body and especially our gut. And the biggest research that's coming out right now is around our gut health and how that impacts our overall health and our weight and our everything. So our gut health is something we're going to be talking about a lot on some of these future broadcasts, because it's so important, the research that's coming out. So we know now that the sugar substitutes do have an impact on our gut health, and that's something that they haven't really studied yet. So That's coming down the pike. I generally say as little of the sugar substitutes as you can eat is probably a good thing.
Yep.
However, if it's helping you switch over from high sugar things, then, and using it as a bridge, that's all right. But we're really trying to cut back on a lot of these things. The NutraSweet, which is called aspartame, for many people, migraines, lots of side effects. They're just finding that to be a not good substance at all. Splenda people use because you can cook with it. That's sucralose. John's going to talk about that. And then the saccharin, for a long time they took that off the market because they said it caused bladder cancer in rats or something to that effect. And then they took it back on the market and said, oops, our research was wrong. And so that was a little suspect, I think. So, there's a lot of ifs and sugar substitutes. But Jon has put together a wonderful presentation on some of the new sugar substitutes, some that I hadn't even heard of, that he has put together. So he's going to load that up there so we can take a look at that.
Yeah, so what I did was I did a little N=1 study on myself kind of thing where I took a bunch of artificial sweeteners, some natural, some not, and I would test my blood sugar in the morning, and then I would take it, and then I would test it 30 minutes after and an hour after, and this is the results. So the first one I did was just the baseline study, or baseline. So I'm sitting on my cord.
So for those of you, there's a glucometer or a meter that you test your blood with in the morning, and it's a little pinprick. You've probably seen people with diabetes often test their blood. And the normal fasting in the morning after you've gone 8 to 12 hours without eating is about 70 to 100. Under 100 is preferable.
Okay. And then, so the ones I'm testing is sugar, erythritol, stevia, monk fruit, sucrose, sucralose.
Which is Splenda.
Yeah. Allulose, xylitol, mannitol, and Montatol. These words are hard to pronounce.
Right? It's like a different language.
You nail it every time, and then you go live and you mess it up. And then aspartame. So sugar was my baseline. So what that basically did was I'd wake up, take my blood sugar fasting, and my baseline for sugar was 79 was my fasting. 30 minutes after taking it, my blood sugar was 116. And then 60 minutes after, my blood sugar was 91. So even after an hour of taking 2 tablespoons of sugar was 91. So I still didn't recuperate from it. And I actually, when I build my diet for the day, that's what I base off of is, will I bounce back to where I was within an hour? If I do, then that food is okay with me. Mm-hmm. So that's what I basically do for that. So erythritol is a alcohol-based sugar, and you have a good way of saying it where the OALs means alcohol-based.
Right. So it's a sugar alcohol, and if it has the TOL at the end, it generally, if you look at a label, that's going to be a sugar alcohol. Yeah.
Okay. And so that morning, my blood sugar was 79. When I checked it 30 minutes later, it was 79. And when I checked it 6 minutes later, it was 76. So what that tells you is my body took it, didn't change it at all, and then I had an average dose of metabolism at the 60-minute mark, which means my body was still processing stuff that's very normal and stuff like that. So so
it didn't impact your blood sugars at all.
Nope. And it actually, you can bake with this stuff. You can add it. So this is a complete sugar substitute.
What we know about the sugar alcohols is that it's not absorbed by our body for the most part. Some of them are, but very few. So it tastes sweet, and yet our body can't use it. And so it goes through our body and our gut just like it's not being utilized or broken down. What can happen with the sugar alcohols that John's going to talk about is that because it's not broken down, it then enters the colon in large molecules and it starts to ferment, which means it can make you feel very gassy and uncomfortable. Even in your stomach, it can start to make you feel really uncomfortable. So sugar alcohols are not digested. Therefore, for some people, they can really be impactful as far as your comfort level after eating this stuff.
Yep.
I once had a little bit of ice cream from Baskin and Robbins that had some of those TOLs in it. It was sugar-free. And boy, did I have a gut reaction to it. And this was before surgery, so, it was like dumping.
Right.
Yeah. So the one thing about these is if you have a slow-moving gut too, these are going to affect you more. The longer it sits in your system, the worse it is.
Yeah.
So the next one is stevia. So stevia is actually a plant. It's broken up, grounded up. It's actually a natural substance. So baseline for me that day was 83. It went up 1 point and then down 3 points. So frankly, no real impact at all. So, and actually, it's very healthy for you. I actually think this is a great one.
I think it's one of the stevia is probably the one that most people would recommend using as one of these artificial sugars of all that are out there now.
Yeah. So the next one is one that a lot of people like to put in their teas and stuff like that. Some people say it tastes good. It is 100% natural. It is a plant and stuff like that. However, I really didn't like the taste of it by itself. It kind of didn't agree to me very well. Had no intestinal problems at all. It just didn't go down my palate very well. I tried it a few days later in my tea. It was more tolerable. So it worked out good. I can see why people like it. But slight change, up 6 points, down 3 points at the hour mark. Now the meter has a fluctuation of 3, and so +3 -3. So this is pretty good. So the next one, sucralose. This is Splenda. So this brand removes the mannitol, monodextrose, which is the really bad thing. But frankly, you're going to see here that really no change, like a slight up, slight down. But this is the stuff that's in like Diet Coke and stuff like that. This is not healthy for you. So I've already listed 3 good versions. So if you can get away with it, you could stay away from this. You can use the erythritol instead of this for baking. And just remember that it can create issues, but you shouldn't be eating 4 or 5 cookies anyways. So it's just a way of mindsetting yourself that way.
Right.
So anything you want to add on that?
Just that for a lot of the patients that I work with, the Splenda is like, it causes it to be a diuretic. So a lot of people find that they're peeing more. So they're probably losing some hydration by drinking this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next one is allulose. It's actually a kind of a new one out there. It's real. It's a real sugar. It's actually a plant and stuff like that. So it's actually all natural. Pam didn't really know much about this at all, and it's new out there. So what it did for me is it had some pluses and some minuses. So baseline was 89 that day. I had 0 change, and at the 60-minute mark, I actually started burning more sugar. Like it actually started my body to start metabolizing. The only issue I had was, mind you, I took the same sweetness level for all of the items was the same. So to get the sweetness level of sugar of the amount I took, I had to take quite a bit of this stuff, and it did create quite a bit of intestinal gases. I wouldn't say it made me have to go to the bathroom. So it wasn't bad. It made me have to go. I took it within the hour. My bowels were gone.
So if you're constipated, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. It worked. But it was not bad. It was nowhere near dumping or anything like that. But it worked. Now this is the active sweetener in Quest bars and No Foods and stuff like that, which are 2 very well-known brands. So if you want to try this out without buying it, go get a Quest bar, read the label, and make sure we're there, and you might find that it's working better. Quest is actually a good company that I'm noticing is really on top of the nutrition market. So they're doing good.
Yep.
So xylitol. I hated this stuff. It was horrible. They say it's all natural.
It's in a lot of sugar-free gum and sugar-free mints. They use a lot of xylitol for that. And toothpaste now too. And it's toxic for dogs. Yes.
Yeah. So xylitol is actually. I'll just go to the next slide. So they say that it's not going to affect your blood sugar. It made me spike as bad as sugar. So
Interesting.
I don't know why I did the test I did this one 3 days in a row, and they were all pretty much the same because I thought it was just a bad meter, and it made me feel like junk. And then I did some more research on it. Over 50 to 60% of this stuff is actually absorbed. Like, remember how we talked about the erythritol, where it doesn't absorb, it just kind of gets in there and ferments. This stuff does. I had less stomach discomfort, but it was absorbed, and it actually went in my system and spiked me a lot.
Interesting.
So, and that may be a result of the bariatric surgery where things just absorb
Right.
faster for
The
me. So
difference, right.
this would have been a little different, but this is in a lot of protein shakes. So, like, I know Premier Protein has this stuff in it, and the thing is, with Premier Protein, that actually did give me blood sugar issues.
Interesting.
So stuff like
Even
that.
though there's only 3 grams of carb in it, right?
Yeah.
Or 5 grams of carb, yeah.
Well, they actually don't count these as carbs.
Right, exactly.
When they do that. So,
Maltitol.
maltitol. I can lose my
I don't
brain
know this
day.
one about this
So,
one very much.
30 are. This is in a lot of the GNC protein shakes and stuff like this. This is another. Those last two are the ones that are used the most because they're cheap. It didn't really. It spiked me too. So maybe this is just my body being different.
right.
So stuff like that. But I felt weird about this. But this is a good core cause versus correlation type thing. Is I have never liked the protein shakes and stuff like that hold this stuff in it, but also a lot of the protein cookies and all that stuff, they have this stuff in them, and I've never liked them.
Yeah.
They made me feel weird.
Right.
So I've learned that this is just those two substances are not good. So
Right.
maybe I thought that was the protein powders they were using in those cookies, but it probably was the sugar, the substitute. So aspartame, this stuff.
Also called NutraSweet.
Yep, it did absolutely nothing to me, but it's horrible for you.
Yeah.
So even though it didn't affect my blood sugar, my health, I would not recommend this one. So that's what I got for there.
That one is, that one's kind of going down the more toxic road, I think, at this point now.
Yeah.
And all of you are probably not going to be sitting there and testing your blood sugar like Jon did, which was really amazing. And Jon, can you talk about how you compared like the volume of the different ones also? You told me, but why don't you share how you did that?
So what I did was there's a website where you can actually match the sweetness level. Where I just basically typed in how much sugar I was going to do, and then I could type in the sweetness level of each to be the equivalent of the sugar. That was just a way for my little N=1 study to make sure that it was spot on. So, but the amounts I had to take were not an average serving. That's what people need to remember.
Right.
So like. No, some things did spike, some things didn't. But for me to have that amount in that one sitting would not be normal.
Right.
So the ones I would actually, I'll go back to.
And I think also just the mindfulness of listening to your body. How does it feel after eating some of these things? For you guys, it will be different than what Jon experienced. So just really checking in and being mindful about how does this make me feel?
Yeah.
Even though it's low calorie and I like the drink of it, I like the taste of it, it doesn't make me feel good. So probably is a good indicator that it's probably not good for your body if it's not making you feel good.
Yeah. So sugar. Obviously is the one where we are comparing it to. Erythritol, I would say, is my number 3 choice. Stevia is my number 1. I think it's kind of a toss up between allulose and monk fruit. It kind of depends on what it is. Those are the 3 that I thought were the best for me.
That's just an amazing study you did. I thought that was really fun.
It was but see, I would actually recommend people to try stuff like that. And how we get my design of my program is heavily based on technology. So what I recommend is there's the Fitbit scale, or like the just different. Here, go here. So we're not look at that guy. There's a Fitbit scale. There's the Withings scale, the Nokia scale. Just any scale that measures your body fat percentage, your lean mass percentage, and your weight. The Nokia scale is great because it also does water weight. So like how much plump you are. So just a little thing is I recently had a pretty major surgery because my stomach my intestines had a little bit of a problem. So I walked in the door and I had gained about 20 pounds of water weight.
From the hospital.
From the hospital.
Right.
So because during surgeries they pump you full of fluid and stuff like that.
With salt in it, saline. So you're gonna,
Yeah. So I went home. I got all the water weight off within 4 or 5 days, and then all of a sudden the scale started dropping even more. So I went from 205, now I'm 186, but what I learned was most of that has been muscle because I cannot lift right now because I'm still healing. So now if I was just trying to lose weight, I would see the scale dropping like that thinking, spot on, I'm losing weight, I'm doing good. But now I know that that's actually not the proper way to do it. But also because I know that, I look at the scale and I'm not freaking out. I know that my body weight is changing right now because of my medical, problem. I can't lift right now, so I'm losing some muscle mass. I will get it back, and I'll go back to where I want to be. So that's just a way you kind of use technology a little bit to help you out. So, but the blood sugar monitor, if you're if you're trying to see if that meal is good for you, and you can even do it per meal, like make the whole meal, test your blood sugar, eat the meal, test it 30 minutes after you're done eating, and test it in an hour again and see what it did for you. And if you feel good on it and your blood sugar didn't have that big of an impact, go for it. So that's that. So let me, I'll pull up the rest of Pam's slides.
I don't think there's too many more, but
I think there's 2. Oh, you do talk a little bit about stevia.
Yep. Again, stevia is one of the ones that most I would say most practitioners, dietitians, people in the healthcare field, and others, of course, are saying that the latest research indicates that this plant is safe to use for humans. And the Center for Science and the Public Interest is one website that I go to a lot. I get their publication. Again, it's CSPI. It's called Nutrition Action. And they've rated sugar substitutes also and done a lot of research. They are not impacted by big pharma or big business or big sugar companies by their research. And so they really look at the research and they put stevia in the safe category. So that's always reassuring for me because I know they do their work pretty solidly.
Exactly.
And again, a lot of the research that we did in the past, we're using rats. And there's a difference between rats and human physiology. So that's important to recognize. A lot of the research that's being done out there is being impacted and funded by the very organizations that want a certain outcome to that research. So really important when you're looking at research to understand that not all research is solid, and it's really important to be suspicious of a lot of the research that's out there. It's hard to know what to believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you guys see studies out there that you're like, skeptical on it, go ahead and send it to us. We'll find out, and we'll actually come back and tell you guys, hey, this one is not a good study purely because who funded it.
Right.
That's the first thing. Whenever you look at a study, that's the first thing I look at. Right. Who funded it? Because if it's paid for, like if it's a study on Gatorade, paid for Gatorade, who's the
fructose.
Yeah, exactly.
Fructose Association, or they'll have a name that they'll come up with an offshoot of their organization, so it doesn't look like it's funded by them. But then you have to do some deeper digging to see who really is the roots of all of this. It's really
and the main thing is one study is not good enough.
Right, exactly.
So if you see one study, and you can manipulate any study to say what you want. So just remember that.
Right.
So we talked a little bit earlier, but I don't think we did enough, was the fermentation and stuff like that. So kombucha is really good that I do. Anything else that is a good fermented food that you think would be good?
Well, there's kimchi, which is a fermented food. There's sauerkraut, which is great. I mean, some good yogurts are out there as well. The Nancy's yogurt yogurt and some of the more natural ones. Again, yogurt used to be like one kind of yogurt and it was plain and it was well done. And now you have the whole wall of yogurt at the store trying to figure out which one is best. And a lot of them have added sugars to them, which kind of defeats the purpose of having this really good fermented food. Kombucha that Jon talked about is a product of tea and sugar and a mother. Looks like a mushroom, but it's a starter. And basically, again, it ferments and it's really good for our gut. So we're getting to know more about our gut health, and we know that a lot of these fermented foods. I like to put a little kimchi in my salads. When I have those, just put like a couple tablespoons in there. You don't need a lot, but every day trying to get some kind of these great probiotics to help with our gut health. We have a lot of our soil, a lot of our food has been highly processed, and a lot of the really good stuff that we used to get, natural foods are not present anymore. So sometimes we have to find these fermented foods to add back in. Oh, beer is fermented too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yes.
I
Yes.
have a yogurt question.
Yeah.
If a yogurt says it says that it's made out of natural culture, live culture. So does that mean it's one we can trust then? Are they required to be honest about that?
Then we have to look at how much. So they could, sometimes they put in a little tiny bit and say it's in there. And then other times, like Nancy's yogurt, we know is a really good basic one that they use a lot of really good probiotics. So again, it's false advertising. They could add just a tiny minute in there and say made with these cultures when it's not as much as we generally want to have. And
Exactly.
I think a lot of the big companies are the ones that are making a lot of these more highly processed ones. You're going to pay probably a little bit more for the less processed ones for sure.
You can make yogurt.
Yes, you can make yogurt.
I
Yes.
used to.
Yeah, I used to too. And then I don't know what got in the way of that, but yeah.
Life.
Yeah, it's easier to buy the yogurt that you can. But yes, that's a great question because it's really hard to know. The new labels that are coming out next summer, if our current administration doesn't stop it, will be showing us what the added sugar is. It will have on the label the added sugar, so we'll be able to look at something like yogurt and see how much is being added to it and how much is the natural, because there's natural sugar in yogurt made from the milk, which is lactose. So there will be some even in plain yogurt, right?
Yeah.
But how much is added, we can't know. But the new labels will be giving us that info, which is going to be great. I think it's going to be really great. Yeah.
How can you compare probiotics in yogurts? Because they don't say how much.
Right. Yeah. No, it's really hard to do that. I would say the less processed it is, like again, Nancy's yogurt, or there's a lot of local. Yeah, I think Fabergé does a good job. I think that is a good one too. And that, of course, Fabergé now has like the lime. You add the little lime syrup to it or something like that. So be mindful of that. But I think the Fabergé is a good quality one too. Yeah, they're plain. Yeah.
I like that Icelandic one.
Yeah, the Skyr or SKYR is another good one. Yeah, so those are, or Siggy's is the one I think I'm thinking of. Yeah, yes. Yeah, so those are good. And again, those are the ones that are a little more expensive that you're going to get at the health food store or the health food section at Freddy's, et cetera. But those are generally going to be less sugar, less processed, and better for you, better for your gut. Yeah.
Yep. So I think the main thing is trust your company, like trust the brand you're buying. Shopping sales is great, but also get a nice natural way. And a lot of sugars a lot of yogurts have a lot of sugar in them.
Yeah. And they can have artificial sugars added too.
And I always, how I always do it is I want to add my flavoring. So I always buy plain yogurt. I will buy plain yogurt and I'll add my strawberries. I'll add that stuff. And I actually will make like, I make a sugarless jam where I use flax seeds instead of pectin, because if you do that and let it, because flax seeds, chia. That's actually what I meant to say. Chia seeds, because chia seeds will actually swell and make it like a gelatin. And then whenever I want to have yogurt, I do that, mix it up really good, and it's all natural, great fats. It's wonderful for you.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So real quick, Bariatric Support Online, we have this recommended page board where if you go there, you can click on any of these links and we get a small little percentage. It doesn't affect you at all, but this is our quick and dirty recommended products. If you follow us at all, I'm really big into the kettlebells, and I can give you guys all about that. Bone broth is great source of protein and just really great additive to use as a base for like soups and stuff. If you're having bariatric surgery, I love doing bone broth. It has a great source of collagen-based protein, which is going to help your skin. The scale right here is the one I'm talking about, and the Fitbit is great for tracking and stuff like that. So
And today is Cyber Monday.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You might get a discount on it as well.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about helping tracking. So that's what I do for tracking, basically. And are those scales 100% accurate? No, but they're 100% accurate to themselves. So just focus on that. So that's the main thing, guys. I didn't see any comments with Facebook. Do you have anything to add at all or anything?
I don't. That's just, that's so a nutshell of kind of a bigger picture of what we're talking about. And we'll kind of get into nitty gritty about things in the future.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a big picture about the macronutrients and what they do.
Yeah, and stay tuned, guys. We're going to get a better schedule down about when we're going to be doing these live streams, and a lot's going to come. So go to bariatricsupportonline.com, sign up for our newsletter, and just go from there. And also join us on the Facebook page, YouTube. Facebook is where we're going to go live, and then we will post it to YouTube and stuff later. So the live stuff is all going to be free to members and stuff like that. And then we're going to go much more into the membership stuff if you guys like this stuff. So thanks, guys.
And let us know what kind of future information you'd like us to talk about as well. So give us an idea of what stuff is important to you so we can address that as well.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.